Making a similar point on Leafs Talk last night about how you could just call this thing the Two Nations Cup because that Canada USA game is going to be everything, and I do think that it is going to spark something in us, especially the people who love hockey and were essentially raised on the import of and the crushing disappointment of certain Olympic and international losses. That it's going to be a holy crap, we didn't realize what we were missing until it was here. And so I understand people's cynical approaches and the whole it's a made-up tournament and Russia's not there and it's only a few games and why should I care? It's like, trust me, I think that if you love hockey, if you love hockey, you're going to feel a sense of pride if Canada beats the United States. You are going to care about it when Canada laces them up, steps out on the ice against the Americans, and has to prove once again that this is our sport against a country with a incredibly massive population discrepancy from us. So no, it's going to matter. It is absolutely going to matter, and it is going to again remind us of what we've been missing. For me, the only other real thing is I'm very, very interested to see who they play some of these top guys with, because when you see the line projections, right, you go, this isn't necessarily what it actually is. This is just where they put the names down. But I can't wait to see who they play with McDavid. And I can't wait to see if they do put Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon and Brad Marchand together. Like if they, in a very, very short tournament, how are you going to try and make the lines knowing that you don't have the luxury of time to try to figure out chemistry? So that's the real point of fascination to me, too, is out of this deep forward core that has so many names where, our team here at Sportsnet made a secondary Team Canada. How are you going to balance the minutes? Who are going to be the guys? Who's going to be the Rick Nash of this tournament, right? Where they emerge as a more beloved figure who kind of maybe takes this tournament by the reins and runs away with it. And who do the super duper stars play and how much do they play? Cannot wait. Cannot freaking wait. It's going to be so good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm sorry. I'm into it. I'm into it now. Anyways, you want to move to Leafs?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's stick with goaltending because you wrote an article on it. And I think the article is very good because it really does point out everyone can understand how good the Leafs goaltending is this season, right? You don't need to be a brain genius, but you really do a great case of outlining just how different this is from teams in the past. Because I think people would look at it and go, well, they had hot stretches of Campbell. Well, they had some good iterations of Freddie Anderson. Well, they've had some good stretches of goaltending. It's like this is way, 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 way better than anything we've seen here in this era.
Yeah, they haven't had a season. Basically, what I lay out in the piece, they haven't had a season with their overall team goaltending, their two top goalies, be this much better than the league average since Felix Potvin in 1993. Statistically, with what they've done so far this year, that's how good they've been. The Leafs are second in the NHL in goals against right now. They're fourth in team save percentage, and that includes two bad games from Hildeby early in the year. Both their goalies are at .920 save percentages, which the Leafs have not had since the 60s. It was a Johnny Bauer season the last time they had two goalies with a .920 save percentage. Mm-hmm. The goalies just haven't been good. They've been outstanding, and I think that there's been one of the reasons I wanted to write the column the way that I did was I think there's been too much talk about there's a new coach and Chris Tanev, and I think those have been factors. But I think the biggest factor in them being second in the league in goals against is the goalies. They've both been fantastic, and it's become so routine that, and maybe I don't know. I mean, I know you guys have talked about a lot about the goalies on Leafs Talk, but it's just become a thing with this team where you don't really need to. It's kind of like when Austin Matthews is scoring 69 goals in a season. It's like, he scored again. Yeah, he had another 2-goal game. The goalies have been so good through 25 games that it's just I think we've taken it for granted a little bit that it's just the way it's going to be now.
I don't think that it's taken for granted just simply because the workload that both players have had throughout their careers is going to remain a little bit of a question mark. I think that you're right in the sense of it probably doesn't get enough credit in comparison to Berube and the defense, but I do disagree with you where it comes to that's overstated or not as impactful, because to me there is a true eye test component to this as well. I think that there is an intangible component to this as well, which is Chris Tanev has made a massive difference on this team, and where I can tell you too is the penalty kill, right? Like the penalty kill has been incredible on this team. they are limiting chances in a different way. It is like night and day better from what it was a season ago. You look at where they sit, that's coaching, that's defensive players, and that has drastically impacted what these save percentages are as well. Like, I actually think it's just a very good balance of both of the two things, where you do have a team that is more responsible defensively. You do have a team that I think is more committed to it, that does block shots at a higher rate, that is more committed to that side of the puck, who is playing it better, who has a much better penalty kill, but then also the goaltenders are great. I don't think we need to like rob Peter to pay Paul in terms of figuring out who is the bigger part of this equation. I think it's like they found a real beautiful balance with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly both things are working in tandem. I just think it's really interesting when you look at the defensive statistics because, you know, they're not a great team at controlling possession right now. They're not a great team at shot suppression. Like, they're still other teams are spending a lot of time in their zone. Like, they're really good at controlling the front of the net, and they're really good at blocking shots and taking the lanes away. And absolutely, that's going to help a goaltender. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that's, to me, has become the narrative of their season, is that Berube has come in and made them this defensive juggernaut. And statistically, it's hard to prove that. I think that they're better defensively, but they've had some seasons in the last 4 or 5 years where they've been really, really good defensively. And I think the argument that they have better personnel to play a defensive style and to put up those results is 100%, especially Tanev. I mean, he's the big one. But it's interesting, though, you know, you take Jake McCabe out of the lineup, and I know they haven't played great teams the last 2 games, but that in other years would feel like a huge problem. Like he was, and now they can plug and play some other guys and still get pretty good results. And we'll see if that continues when they start to face some better teams than Chicago and Nashville. But they've looked good no matter who they've had out there on the blue line.
But I also think, though, like, again, if we're contextualizing this in terms of what they're being asked to do, when it's like, hey, puck possession time, one, like the amount of injuries that they've had to the forwards, right? So let's see what this normalizes to defensively when the team is at least closer to fully healthy, when they are not missing like, 6 forwards at a time and working in guys from the AHL. 2 is like, that's the style that they're playing now. And that's actually the style that the league is moving more towards, which is like, hey, dump and chase. You know, put it in deep. We're not going to play as much East-West hockey. We're not going to have the puck as much. And so some of those stats, I think, are going to get inflated the other way. The other part of it is, where are the shots coming from, right? Like when we're looking at these defensive metrics, how much better are the Leafs defending the front of the net and the most dangerous zones than they were in years prior? And that's where like the personnel and the coaching does matter to me, because they have gotten better in those areas. And the personnel, like unquestionably, night and day, completely different when it comes to, that area of the team specifically. And that's even taking into account that they haven't had a guy like Yanni Hakanpää, who is supposed to provide an even bigger boost in that area. That even does come with a small or a sample of Simon Benoit really struggling to find his game in the early parts of the season. And I think a guy who's coming around, that does come with Oliver Ekman-Larsson playing a big chunk of the season on his offside, which he's clearly not as effective at. Like, there's so many reasons to be just like overly optimistic about not just what you've seen from them defensively, but also all those underlying pieces of it that are actually going to only make you feel even more emboldened as the year goes on. At least you would think so.
Yeah. And your point about missing players is, I mean, Austin Matthews is one of the hugest pillars of their defensive game and has been since he entered the league.
You're talking about him as a Selke guy last year. There was a real case.
Yeah, I mean, this year early on, even with him playing injured, it just, especially with, and it's, you talk about the penalty kill, like the results when Austin Matthews was on the penalty kill regularly were elite. Like they were some of the best of any forward in the NHL, and some of that's he's out there with Marner, but he's just a very, very, very good defensive player. And you take your number one center out of the lineup. I mean, I've been really pleasantly surprised with how well Tavares has been able to step into that role and do that. But if they would have had Matthews the whole season, especially with him in better health, that would make an impact as well.
All right, let's talk about Matthews and Marner. So are we just abandoning all we saw from Matthews and Tavares, or sorry, from Marner and Tavares after a period of play? Where's your thought on this?
I don't know. I don't know what you do. I mean, the thing is that Matthews and Marner really want to play together. Like they just, I kind of think you have to keep going back to Tavares and Marner just because the season is really about the playoffs, right? Like, I mean, it's great that they can make it look amazing in December against Nashville and they can turn it on and beat one of the worst teams in the league by just pumping a few goals past them and making it look easy and making it look pretty. But that's not what the season's about, and that's not what this team is about. And Marner has shown he's second in NHL scoring in the last, what's the number, 17 games, I think. I think he's got 29 points in 17 games. Natchez in Carolina is the only player that has more points than he does over that span. He just completely turned it on with Matthews out of the lineup, and I think you want to keep some of that mentality with Marner and with this team, that it's not just about the one line. They look like such a one-line team when it's Matthews and Marner together, and you lose so much more of what Tavares can do. If you're playing with Tavares with, who do they have him with early in the year? Pacioretty and McMahon or whatever. You're not going to get what you've gotten in the last 15 games. So unlocking more of Tavares and giving the team two really dangerous lines, that's what I'd be looking to do, even though they looked amazing yesterday.
I'm with you. I got caught up in the moment yesterday talking about it and going, well, you have to go back to it next game because it was so good. And now you don't. You just nailed the biggest part of this is, what are you getting out of Tavares? So much of this season has been people screaming from the rooftops now that this guy should be on Team Canada, right? Like, the whole fan base is mad that he was not put on this team. Or at least for the most part. I shouldn't say the whole fan base. But either way, Tavares has been great and Marner's been great. And that's been for an extended stretch. And I do want to see if that can continue. I do want to keep Tavares engaged with that. I do want to have that second line. And I also think that, to me, you can just continue with this formula where you're chasing a game, you're down a goal, and you shake things up and you try to get a little bit more offense and you shorten the bench and you start rolling those guys. But
they're going to be together on the power play. You're down a goal.
That's what I mean. It's not like they're never going to play together. They're going to get creative. They're going to have their offensive zone draws where they throw them out there. They're going to have games where one guy maybe isn't playing as much or going a little bit better, where they double shift them. And again, you're always going to have that at your disposal. I just don't think you start with it. I think that you make it something that is available to you rather than your first move. And again, if you want to go, this is the secondary part of this conversation for me, is when they get Domi back, they get Pacioretty back, they get McMahon back, right? You take those names. Where are they all going, right? Because it's an easier thing to do in a game like that where Marner's playing with Pontus Holmberg. And you say, well, God, this is not really working. So give him Matthews and he's going great. And then boom, 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 some of those Pontus Holmberg shots not even shots, missed pucks, are going in the back of the net. Imagine Marner's making that drop pass to Holmberg yesterday where he's flying through the middle and Matthews tucks the second one.
I don't think Holmberg's doing the little one-touch tip through the middle.
I think you could let him try to do that for the rest of his life in a simulation over and over and over again, and he would never be able to accomplish it. So that's...
Do you know what Holmberg's career high was in the Swedish league? He played 4 or 5 years there. His career high in goals. You know what it was?
No idea.
11 goals.
I was going to guess 8.
He had 9 one year and then 11 the next year.
Yeah.
He was a 6th-round pick. He was picked as an overage player. He was 19 when he was drafted as a 6th-round pick, and he didn't produce in the Swedish league until he was close to his mid-20s. He was an older player. So everything that he's done has been an unbelievable development for the team, that he's even playing where he is. But it's just too much to ask of him. He's not an offensive player at this level.
No, he's not. But you know who is? The other guys the other guys that I mentioned. And so if you're talking about having Pacioretty, Domi, and McMahon, what have we learned about those 3 players? It's that if they're just down the lineup without one of those stars, you're not going to really notice them. Bobby McMahon, when he was not playing up with John Tavares and Mitch Marner, went 12 games without a point, right?
Yeah.
He was not overly impactful. He's not your classic bottom 6 guy. What these guys is what has happened with Max Domi this year when he didn't play with William Nylander, and when he has not played with Austin Matthews, or how different he looked a season ago when he was playing down the lineup as a 3C versus what he looked like when he was Austin Matthews' wing. I want to see those guys play with the talent. And I think that the talent can bring a lot out of those dudes. I get Marner and Matthews works. I absolutely do. Guess what? Great players generally tend to be able to play with great players. It's just It's a thing that we've proven throughout time. Very rare circumstances where you look at two really awesome guys and say, oh, wow, they're not very good together. What I want to see is more out of a McMahon. What I want to see is more out of a Max Domi. What I want to see is more out of a Max Pacioretty. Go on down the line, and I don't think you're getting that if you're stuffing all those dudes down the lineup and telling them to drive one. I think that we've kind of figured that out, and that the more time that they spend trying to push that idea, the more they're just going to find that it's more of the same.
Yeah, and it comes back to the old conversation of they need another center down the lineup, right?
Sure. I mean, do they?
I think the other thing is that Domi is kind of like Marner light for Matthews.
Yeah.
Like they're close, they're friends. The game is similar offensively anyway. Matthews likes playing with him, and he can create, the shot openings that Matthews needs. So, and Tavares and Marner, their line has been really good defensively and has been able to eat defensive zone starts. And so maybe, I mean, it sounds weird saying this, but maybe the Matthews line is you're leaning on it more offensively, and you're not counting on them to play up against other teams' top lines. I mean, they're going to get minutes against other teams' top lines because teams are going to want to play those players against Matthews, but maybe you're looking at some pairings, and it's, I don't know, do you go Nyes, Matthews, Domi, maybe? And then McMahon with Tavares and Marner probably makes the most sense. And then you try and, what you have left, you try and make something with that.
The Toronto Maple Leafs may be taking a new approach to salary management, which could directly impact Mitch Marner's contract negotiations. During Kyle Dubas' tenure as general manager, the team didn't hesitate to spend heavily, and this trend began with a 6-year extension signed by Marner in 2019. At the time, Marner's $10.9 million annual cap hit set the market for superstar wingers, surpassing comparable players like Mikko Rantanen of the Colorado Avalanche, who signed a 6-year deal with a $9.25 million annual cap hit. Now, however, times seem to be changing. TSN's Pierre Lebrun recently reported that the Maple Leafs have implemented an internal salary cap, aiming to ensure no player earns more than captain Austin Matthews, who signed a 4-year extension worth $13.25 million per season in August 2023. The team's primary concern revolves around Marner's agent, Darren Ferris, who, according to Lebrun, might push for a percentage of the total salary cap instead of a fixed dollar amount. This could result in Marner's cap hit exceeding Matthews' $13.25 million, conflicting with the Leafs' new financial strategy. Ferris is known for driving negotiations to the limit, often taking his clients to free agency. This raises fears that discussions between Marner and the Leafs could drag on until July 1st, giving Marner and his camp all the leverage in negotiations. Another complicating factor is the rising market. Lebrun noted that Mikko Rantanen believes he could secure $14 million per season as a free agent. This sparks the question, could Marner demand even more? And would Ferris take that gamble, knowing the Leafs might opt to move on and sign another player? Marner has made it clear on multiple occasions that Toronto is where he wants to be. As a local player with deep ties to the city, he's expressed his desire to spend his entire career wearing the blue and white of the Leafs. However, staying with the team may require him to accept less than market value, especially if the front office remains committed to its new salary structure. Such a sacrifice could be vital for the team's collective success and to avoid financial issues that have plagued the recent past. While negotiations are still in the early stages, it's evident that Marner's future with the Leafs is at stake. Maple Leafs fans may need to prepare for the possibility of significant changes, but they can also trust in the player's commitment to the city and the franchise to find a compromise. The Maple Leafs' decision to implement an internal salary cap reflects a broader shift in their team-building philosophy. After years of prioritizing top-end talent with hefty contracts, the organization appears determined to strike a balance between superstar contracts and depth throughout the roster. This strategy aims to avoid the pitfalls of past seasons, where a lack of financial flexibility often left the team vulnerable in critical playoff moments. For Mitch Marner, this shift creates a unique challenge. On one hand, his value to the Leafs is undeniable. A consistent top scorer and elite playmaker, Marner has been instrumental in driving the team's offense. On the other hand, his ability to command a salary that rivals or exceeds Austin Matthews could put the Leafs in a difficult position, especially with a potential need to strengthen other areas of the roster. As the 2023-24 season progresses, the Leafs must weigh the potential consequences of sticking to their cap philosophy. Losing a homegrown talent like Marner would undoubtedly sting for fans and the organization alike.